Hi, so welcome to 5 considerations for using low doses in clinical practice. I'm running a couple minutes behind. Mel was going to take the lead on this class, and I was going to chime in. And Mel got a nasty migraine a short while ago, and so I am flying solo tonight, which means I'm probably going to ramble more. But there's also a decent chance that I will inadvertently teach a whole lot more about actual low doses than what we planned. So. I think we have some fun stuff to discuss tonight. So 5 points, and we will pause after each one for questions, and then we can have a bigger discussion after the class. So I guess let's start with why we might use low dose botanicals, and what are we even talking about when we say low dose botanicals. So low dose botanicals, I originally learned them as toxic botanicals, but I don't know that plants really want to be like broadly referred to that way, since they produce a variety of plant compounds that are defensins against a variety of other creatures, including humans. Um, Low dose botanicals refer to plants with a higher potential for harm or toxicity than more commonly used and more commercially available herbs. So with low dose botanicals, we're talking about plants like poke, plants like pulsatilla, plants like belladonna, henbane, gelsemium, nux vomica, plants that kind of like run the spectrum. And we're going to talk a little bit about that spectrum as the last question. But these are plants that have a strong apparent to like readily apparent physiological actions. Like many plants, you can feel immediately. Not all plants, I can chug down a quart of nettles and not really feel a significant difference in my body. But if I chug a quart of chamomile, I might feel a significant difference in my body. The one of the differentials, if you will, between more commonly used herbs and low dose botanicals is just the dosage. So whereas it might take me 2 strong, 3 strong cups of chamomile tea to start feeling my nervous system calm down, I might get a similar response from a milliliter or less of a pulsatilla tincture. And of course, everybody has different sensitivities to different actions. Some people feel relaxants very easily, and some people feel stimulants very easily, and some people feel warming herbs or drying herbs or moistening herbs or tightening herbs. They might all feel them at varying levels of sensitivity. But the dosage necessary to feel an herb, in most instances, you feel low doses, um, or the dosage necessary to elicit a significant physiological response is much lower with low dose botanicals, which is why we call them low dose botanicals. We call them that too because high doses are typically more risky or toxic, if you will, but also because they're effective in low doses. And so there are some considerations for choosing low-dose botanicals. Let's see, we got a question come in. Oh, that's a great question, Michael. I am going to be covering that. Hmm, where am I going to be covering that? It's not on my notes, but now it's going to be covered. Probably here in this first point, which has to do with ethical usage. So I'll try to wrap my answer into this broader point, if you will. So all traditional systems of medicine that I'm familiar with used remedies that we would consider to be low dose. Some used them, if not near exclusively, a lot more regularly than we commonly use them in modern Western practice, or even modern TCM and most modern Ayurveda. And the reason for that is they were medicine, and there were no alternatives. If a gentle remedy didn't work, they could not refer somebody to urgent care or to a hospital. They had to increase the potency or efficacy of their therapeutic actions because the severity of the problems that they saw were often much worse and, quite honestly, wildly different than what we normally see in modern herbal medicine. If you read traditional literature, like 90% of it is, at least in Western literature, is how to patch up and wounds and prevent them from getting infected, and how to deliver children without killing the mothers better. And, they were like hardcore health disease focused books. Um, and and now, if if our anti-inflammatories and our anti-nociceptives for pain don't work, we can normally find alternatives with modern medicine. If our feverfew willow chamomile anti-inflammatory, along with our um, you know, Corydalis, Jamaican dogwood anti-nociceptives don't help reduce the pain of a broken toe enough, we can go to urgent care and get NSAIDs, stronger anti-inflammatories, or opioids. But 2,000 years ago, they were the urgent care. And so they would grab opium poppy, they would grab henbane, they would grab belladonna, they would grab these plants with a significant risk of toxicity because the severity of the problems that they were working with warranted a stronger intervention. And so our first big consideration with low dose botanicals is are there more gentle remedies that we could use that might work? And how would we recognize when to start using low dose botanicals, when to start recommending stronger therapeutic interventions? I'm reading from some notes that Mel put together, and so this is her part, and she's really good at it, but I'll try. Check your motives for wanting to use low-dose herbs first and foremost. Being honest with ourselves is an important skill to practice in herbalism and clinical practice. And herb lust and the novelty factor are very real things and should be considered versus needing to having an actual use for expanding your clinical efficacy. It's fun to play with low dose herbs at some point in your career, at least in your own body. Um, Especially if, because most of our low dose herbs affect the nervous system, especially if you appreciate altered nervous system states. But when we talk about using low dose botanicals as therapeutics, we really have to consider, is it warranted? Have we tried more gentle things, or are we sure that we've assessed the problem to be severe enough to warrant introducing a low dose herb early in the course of therapy? Um, do we understand, if possible, to understand the root cause of the presenting health issue? And is the low dose botanical that we're considering appropriate for that cause or palliative for symptoms created by that cause? And if it's palliative, which is totally fine, symptom relief with herbs is a valid and a traditional use of herbal medicine. But if it is a palliative or a symptom suppressing only, are we also considering the root cause and, if possible, addressing it? And do we have time to try that first before suppressing symptoms? Are there any risk to suppressing symptoms with low dose herbs that might mask underlying problems that we might or might not have considered? Have we, if we're considering using low doses for the first time, have we spoken to colleagues or mentors or teachers about other options? Have we researched or considered other options? All of these are, I think, important both practically and philosophically. For me, part of choosing a more gentle remedy rather than jumping straight to a stronger remedy is a respect for the miraculous self-healing nature of the body. Philosophies and opinions on this do vary system to system and practitioner to practitioner. But I am of the belief that when possible, we should try to support the body's innate healing functions rather than push the body's innate healing in one direction or the other, or palliate symptoms or manage or suppress symptoms. Those are important factors. But for me, I think trying my best to understand the root cause and address it is part of my philosophical stance towards health and imbalance and disease. And we all have these innate biases or stances or personal philosophies that unconsciously and if you think about it, possibly consciously guide our decision-making processes for all interventions. And so a consideration for my style, if you will, of herbal medicine is an intervention needed? Is this something that will clear up on its own regardless of the intervention? And if so, should we consider being more conservative with our interventions? And if not, how aggressive with our interventions should we be? What ratio of supporting general health and building health should we have versus supporting specific tissue or organ functions versus addressing specific disorder, disease states? And all of these kind of combined together into a clinical formulation, into a hypothesis of what's going on with this person, and what does a rational and articulable intervention look like. From there, we might consider our herbal formulations. In my style, herbal formulations would be considered alongside a broader case formulation that normally includes dietary and lifestyle stuff. But let's ignore all of that, even though that's like 80% of the work, and just focus in on herbal formulations and low-dose botanicals before I start rambling too much. Also, maybe this will answer Michael's question. So we often use low-dose botanicals to juice up a formula. And by that, I mean using low-dose botanicals with the same or a complementary therapeutic direction as the rest of the formula in an attempt to increase the therapeutic direction, often at less of a dose. So many low-dose botanicals affect the nervous system and our sense of distress or our sense of pain. And if we are using an herbal formula for distress or pain, it's typically going to have a direction. So an herbal formula for pain might be anti-inflammatory, or it might be anodyne or anti-nociceptive, or a combination of those. And so then we might ask, I think I gave the example earlier of what did I say, willow, feverfew, chamomile, anti-inflammatory, or relaxant formula. No, anti-inflammatory formula. And I said we might, if someone has a broken toe, add Corydalis as an anti-nociceptive in, and Jamaican dogwood as an anti-nociceptive and relaxant. And so we would want to consider what are complementary therapeutic indications for someone with a broken toe. We have anti-inflammatory, that makes rational sense, and we can articulate why we might choose anti-inflammatories for things that are broken and elicit an inflammatory response. And we understand that acute inflammatory conditions and tissue damage can drive nociception or pain signaling, if you will. And so we might consider adding Corydalis and Jamaican dogwood in with our anti-inflammatories because it makes sense that we want to, since we are working on a mechanism of the acute pain, also try to directly address that pain. Then we might think, what are complementary or reinforcing therapeutic directions or actions here? And so we might say that something to help people relax would complement that formula well. And that's because pain is distressing, and trying to combat the distress can actually help with pain. And so we have a formula of anti-inflammatories and anti-nociceptives. And so we might consider, do we need a relaxant thrown in? And do we have room in that formula? Does the person have the capacity to take an extra formula? What's the cost factors involved? And might we consider adding a little bit of an herb like pulsatilla that is relaxant in nature and also has some anti-nociceptive and potentially anodyne properties in and of itself. Like, might that be an appropriate complementary therapeutic direction to move that formula in? Or maybe the pain is severe. Maybe the person is chugging relaxants while taking their anti-inflammatory, anti-nociceptive formula for their broken toe. Maybe they're already downing the kava and they are as relaxed as they are going to get, and they are still in pain. In which case, we might say, how might we amplify the anti-nociceptive properties of this formula without drastically increasing the dose? You can only get Corydalis so concentrated in tincture form before it starts falling out of solution. You can really only get it about like a 1-to-1 fluid extract, maybe a 2-to-1 before it starts falling out of solution. And you're already taking like 5 milliliters of that, and the pain is still intense. Might we consider adding a small part of gelsemium into the formula as a complementary anodyne anti-nociceptive that works in a completely different way from our Corydalis and Jamaican dogwood? And so it might, because it uses different mechanisms than Corydalis, which tends to work, we think, on dopaminergic reception and in our interpretive centers of the brain that's taking that nociception and saying, okay, yes, this is actually dangerous and should feel pain. We think that's probably how Corydalis yankuso works. And Jamaican dogwood, we don't have much of an idea of how it's working in the nervous system other than as a general relaxant, and has a tradition of use for pain. But we know that gelsemium works completely different. Like gelsamine, the primary alkaloid, is, I believe, still the only known spinal glycine receptor agonist. And so it might slow down nociceptive signaling in the spinal column before it gets to the brain. And it might also slow down pain signaling in the descending pathway from the brain down, because that goes through the spinal cord too. And these glycine receptors are bound by the alkaloid in this plant. And glycine is a inhibitory neurotransmitter, or glycine receptor activation is an inhibitory process in the spinal column for a variety of like glutaminergic sensation. So yes, rambly, Thomas. Let me make sure I've answered the question here. Yes, so I think it's worth considering low doses in a formula to add potency to, or oomph to, the direction that you want that formula to go. I think I've answered at least the process on the how, why, the worth, the inherent risk. Um, I almost always with clients use low dose herbs in formula this way to add oomph, to juice up a formula. I will occasionally use them as a standalone, but normally that's with folks that I've already tried using even smaller parts in formula, or that's for a severity of pain or distress normally that warrants more oomph than you would want to put into a formula. So you might be able to control the dose of the oomph a little bit better when administering it singly. But I would say 95% or more of the low doses that I give are in formula. Oh yeah, hey Thorne, I'm glad you tried that. Just a little bit of gelsemium makes the Corydalis Jamaican dogwood work so much better. Yeah, it's excellent. And you know, like, I have a big old crush on gelsemium, maybe more so than any other plant, almost any other plant. Gelsemium and I are good friends, and I think that it is an excellent herb to add some oomph or to potency to a formula for pain. It's also amazing for distress, especially distress with the qualitative symptoms of heat and irritation. So distress that feels hot and angry, or pain that feels hot and angry, where gelsemium is excellent for. I at some point realized that gelsemium was like better for anxiety secondary to anger than like any remedy that I've come across, maybe because of that hot quality to that specific type of anxiety. Yeah. Okay. So, second consideration, preparation and delivery method. Um, how you prepare low-dose botanicals directly impacts your the potency and therefore the dosage that you give and the safety of these herbs. Um, I've taught low-dose botanicals for I guess almost 15 years now. Been using them in my practice for 16, 18 years. I don't know. I guess the first well, maybe close to 20 years. The first 5 years of my practice, I did not use low dose botanicals, and I adopted them kind of like, a remedy a year for the next handful of years. I didn't start using them all at once. And so I've been teaching low dose botanicals quite a while, and I remember a potentially serious mistake that I made in a low dose botanical class 16 or 17 probably with Gelsemium, who I'm good friends with. And I grabbed the wrong bottle. I grabbed a 1 to 2 fresh root tincture, which I only really use topically um, instead of my normal 1 to 10 fresh root tincture, because the dosage range in a 1 to 10 is much wider than a dosage range in a 1 to 2, 5 times wider because it's 5 times weaker than a 1 to 2. And so, whereas a dosage range of a fresh 1 to 10 um, might max out depending on the person and their sensitivity, upwards of 50 drops. A dose of an equivalent dose of a 1 to 2 would be like, what is it, 10 drops? That's like a lot less. And so you need to understand the preparation methods that go along with the dosing methods that you're going to use and where they come from and why they exist and what happens if you don't get to the preparation and dosage right. So I grabbed this bottle of 1 to 2 and I every time I teach low doses, I up my dose a little bit to see what happens and also to demonstrate in some instances that remedies are potentially safer than they are commonly thought to be. And I took a big old squirt of this, which, if it was a 1 to 10, would have been oh, okay, I'm starting to like feel relaxed dose. And I took a squirt of it. And a couple minutes later, felt like, oh, this is hitting fast and hard, and looked at the bottle and realized it was a 1 to 2. And like over the next hour, continued to try to teach as my face got like a little bit droopy and my speech slowed down. And I felt like I was kind of moving through mud a little bit. It's very important that you use the right preparation to go with the dosage that uh, goes with that preparation. And so you have to know where to look for that and who figured that out and for what indications and at what dosages. And even after you know those things, which are not necessarily easy to find and understand, you still have to take them into your own body and compare them with ideally known preparations to see if they are relatively equivalent in strength. Um, so I think like I take a little bit of every batch of low dose botanical, any of the low doses that our apothecary makes. I normally make the low doses. And if I don't, I always at least try them because I have like set dosage ranges that we teach in class and that we use in clinic. And if I taste something and that year the batch was just exceptionally strong, I have to let everybody know, hey, this batch used 10 or 20% less. Um, all of these things point towards our third consideration for using low-dose botanicals, which is the clinical experience side and the reason why doing hands-on training and or a mentorship with the folks that use low-dose botanicals is important. These really aren't herbs to learn about through trial and error. It can be done, but others have already done the trial and error. And so I think that for safety considerations, it's really best if you work with somebody that has already been through the process and understands all of these nuances of preparation and dosage and adjusting and when they're indicated and when they're not. Um, I think that it's important if you're going to study or mentor with someone about using these stronger plant medicines, that that person should have clinical experience, not just theoretical knowledge, not just like knowledge in in like their own body. That's valuable. That's important, but using them clinically. One of the reasons why I adopted remedies slowly instead of all at once is I wanted to not only feel them in my body, I wanted time to use them in practice before adding another one on. And I did that for years before I started teaching about low doses. I'm of the opinion that you probably shouldn't teach about something if you haven't used the thing or seen the thing 100 times or more, because there's little nuances that can be easily missed that in some cases become like really clinically important. And I think this is about safety for the person and for our clients, and not about gatekeeping knowledge. Like you can go to Arrowwood and find people that have been experimenting with all types of poisonous plants for decades. And you can read about their experiences and their doses, and you can try that out and hopefully you won't hurt yourself. And I'm like, I guess, generally in support of people being able to alter their body nervous system with whatever they want to do um, for themselves in their body. I don't think that knowledge of using these and their general effects is super secret. As you know, like if you know where to find the eclectic materia medicas and you know how to read that literature and translate the measurements and dosages and understand where they were coming from, all that stuff that you could pretty easily access. And so this information is out there, but while the information is out there, the knowledge is not the knowledge of how to apply those things in modern times with modern situations is something that I think you can only learn from somebody that has clinical experience doing it. And um, I think that's important. I'm also supposed to use this point to pitch our low dose weekend. So I'll just say that every year, last weekend in July, we host a weekend long class where we teach people about low dose botanicals. It's actually a hybrid class. We have an online classroom that has all of like the head knowledge that you need to know. And then the weekend is spent taking low dose botanicals together, experiencing them in our body, and doing the storytelling side of herbal medicine, which is, I think, a special type of learning that you don't necessarily get from, understanding the mechanisms on a screen and a video in an online classroom. Understanding like the story of the plants and how they feel in the body and how they can be used in specific clinical scenarios. That's the type of thing that we do all weekend. And that's, I think, pretty unique because people get to try these very strong herbs that shift physiology pretty strongly in their own body in a supported environment so that, so that folks can become comfortable with using these. That's all the pitching for the low dose weekend that I have in me. Let's see. So part of our approach to low doses is not just teaching them in low dose weekend, but teaching them in our online classroom where we can explain the mechanisms of action and safety considerations and all of like you need to remember these numbers and be conscientious of these specific facts. Um, in that we talk about tropane alkaloids because we use several. We During our weekend we normally take henbane because that is my favorite of the tropane alkaloids. It's much higher in scopolamine than it is in hyoscamine or atropine, like belladonna and datura. And so it has, um, so our plants that contain tropane alkaloids have different alkaloids in different combinations that have varying anticholinergic potencies and receptor sensitivities. We do henbane in the class because it has hyoscine or scopolamine in it that has a stronger central nervous system effects and tends to lead to sedation versus using belladonna datura that have more hyoscamine atropine in them that have more peripheral effects, although they still have some pretty significant central nervous system effects. So these different compounds bind to the five different subtypes of muscarinic receptors. We have M1 receptors that are really abundant in the brain, and these are the ones that scopolamine binds to stronger than others. But then we have M2 receptors in the heart, where atropine more preferentially binds to the M2 receptors, so you get an increase of heart rate or tachycardia. And we have M3 receptors that are present in smooth muscles and glands. And when we block these specific subtypes of muscarinic receptors, we get decreased secretions, bronchodilation, decreased GI motility, pupil dilation, urinary retention. And so We might get to the saying is dry as a bone is part of anticholinergic syndrome. And if that progresses, blind as a bat from the pupil dilation is part of anticholinergic syndrome. So the saying is hot as a hair because it can your atropine especially, but your tropane alkaloids in general can decrease secretions, leading to increased heat. You won't sweat or you won't sweat as much. So hot as a hair, blind as a bat from the pupil dilation, dry as a bone from the decreased secretions, red as a beet, and eventually mad as a hatter. Uh, there's the spectrum of anticholinergic activity, and that's kind of how the binding leads to a progressive set of symptoms. So we cover all of that in the course, and what that means and when that's indicated. Um, and then we spend the weekend taking the plants in our body and enjoying how they feel and each other's companies and talking about how we have taken them and used them clinically. Oh, Michael, such good questions. So could you give examples of what sorts of scenarios that you deem low-dose botanicals as part of as a simple or part of a formula as a necessity relative to adding a benefit strength to a formula? I mean, necessity is such um, it's a loaded word in that question. Like extreme distress will eventually pass, even if it's because it made you hyperventilate and pass out. So, do you need to do a low dose botanical as an anxiolytic? I mean, I don't guess you need to do it. Uh, would you judge severe reoccurring panic attacks that are unresponsive to weaker herbs as worthy of or necessitating adding a low dose botanical? I would, because severe reoccurring panic attacks freaking suck. And if I have a tool that might address them, um, I will use it to. Is it necessary? I mean, I've gotten through severe panic attacks without low dose botanicals, so I don't think that it's necessary. But the same thing with pain, people have varying pain tolerances, and so practitioners have different opinions on when to start intervening with stronger remedies. For me, on a pain scale of 10, where 10 is like a, severe, inconsolable, overwhelming pain, I might consider adding low dose botanicals in when somebody gets up like 7 or above and they have already tried more gentle things. Um, I mean, like I have a pre-made blend I call relief tincture, and I don't recommend it for stubbing your toe. I recommend it for when you have tried more gentle remedies and they aren't working and you need something stronger. If, like in that instance, there is enough gelsemium in that pre-made formula to increase the potency of the formula significantly, but so little that if somebody drank the entire 2-ounce bottle, they probably wouldn't die. Um, because of the relative safety of that formula that has a low dose in it. I leave it up to individuals, to determine when they need to take that formula. I normally will give like another formula, or if not an herbal formula, I will give another thing to address baseline pain, and I'll say, hey, here's this like breakthrough formula, if you will. Or, maybe they wake up every day with a baseline of 6. And if I would normally hold gelsemium for 7 in acute pain, if I have somebody in chronic pain and they wake up at a 6, I will say go ahead and start taking your formula with gelsemium like upon waking. Don't wait until it gets worse. There are a number of situations in which I might shift things around if the person is like, and mostly they have to do with safety. If I'm with the person, I might feel more comfortable administering low-dose botanicals earlier than if I'm not with the person, especially if they have a severe condition. So, I've done quite a lot of house calls as an herbalist, and I've hosted like in-person 21-day health retreats where I am like looking at a person's tongue and taking their pulse, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I'm sitting with them extensively. And so I might decide to use low doses in a little bit different way than if I'm giving them over, like seeing somebody over Zoom. There's a lot of considerations here, and the more experience you have using low doses, I think the more flexible you can be in your approach. But starting with gentler remedies, I think, is always an important concept. Have you found that among those on medications, especially one or a handful of their bodies, almost definitely more likely to have side effects? No, I don't think that medications or multiple medications significantly increase the risk of side effects using low-dose botanicals. I honestly find that side effects using all herbs, including low-dose botanicals, are relatively rare, and I feel very comfortable um, using herbs alongside pharmaceuticals. I mean, like, I guess I don't use St. John's wort very much anymore because of pharmaceuticals or because of the scare of pharmaceutical interactions with St. John's wort, which is much more of a theoretical concern than a practical concern for many cases, but not all cases. And but like beyond that, I am not uncomfortable using almost all of the herbs that I use in people on medications. Clinically relevant side effects and interactions are relatively rare, and especially if you are starting your herbs or herbal formulas individually instead of all at once. And especially if you're starting your dosages rather low and working up, the chance of side effects or interactions is not super common. Uh, I mean, also, like, I sometimes have difficulty remembering what my thought processes were like when my case count was much lower when I was early in my career. I've been doing this a long time, and so 20 years ago, I might have answered that question differently. But right now, all of my clients are on like boatloads of medicines, kind of as the norm. Oh yeah, so anemone, pulsatilla. So some people respond to homeopathic like it's not homeopathic like, but small doses, 1 to 3 drops of pulsatilla, but other people require bigger doses, and it also depends on the preparation. So like anemone pulsatilla in the UK is always prepared dried, and their dosage is always 1 milliliter plus. in the US, we prepare it fresh. So it's more aneminin, protoaneminin, which are tissue irritants. And that's one of the big, but also that's what's affecting the nervous system. And that's one of the big limiting factors with using anemone. But, you know, depending upon the person and their sensitivity and the case and preparation, let's just say in my own body, I can take 30 drops of fresh 1 to 2 anemone and not feel like it's too much. I might feel like my throat doesn't appreciate it. It's pretty acrid. Acrid is that tissue irritation feel. And it can be from legit tissue irritation, but it can also be from binding to receptors that are supposed to signal tissue irritation. So, like the acridity that you get from tobacco and lobelia is not from tissue irritation, it's from binding to the acetylcholine receptors and how that is the nerve pathway for tissue irritation. So, yeah, I think that anemone can be great as an anxiolytic and for panic attacks, and I would include it in some nervous system formulas more long term. So I have a formula, a heart cordial formula that I call Felix Cordis Happy Heart, and it's designed to soothe the emotions and kind of be a balm for a heartache. And I find that many times people going through the worst pangs of grief or heartache also have significant amounts of stress or distress, and so I might include anemone in the Felix formula to be used for a few weeks. I have clients that use the anemone Felix formula once a week right before they go to therapy so that their heart is softened and their nervous system is a little chilled. I think that it can be used appropriately in formulation, but also we're typically talking about more infrequent uses when we're doing that. And I guess I should also, because we're talking anemone here, I should also mention that there is a spectrum of toxicity, if you will. Like all plants are on the spectrum from like food to poison, but even in low doses, there is a spectrum. So our less strong, our weakest low doses include pulsatilla, pokeroot, pokeberry. Some people might include lobelia there. I think of lobelia as maybe even a little under that and not really any risk of toxicity, but it is a more potent remedy and it can freak people out because of how it makes their throat feel. And so we might consider it at the top of the safe herb spectrum, right below moving into the low dose spectrum. From there, we might move up to our medium dangerous low doses like raw wolfia or like night blooming ceres cactus, Cactus grandiflorus. And from there, we might move up to our very strongest of the low doses, the kind of like the serious ones that if you don't use them correctly will kill you. This would be our belladonna, henbane, datura, nux vomica, which has strychnine, like the poison strychnine in it in very high amounts. So that's also where the medicine is. And gelsemium, which you can take enough of to shut down your breathing. Although, how much it takes to do that is debatable in the traditional literature. So the lower we are on that spectrum, the more likely I might be to introduce that to earlier into the therapeutics. There are also just some symptoms that we know are more severe than others. Like there's a difference between being really stressed out and that causing insomnia and having panic attacks and a constant feeling of impending doom. And there's a difference between, oh my God, this hurts and I need to slow down and baby it, and oh my God, this hurts so bad that I'm going to lose my shit and I'll never be able to sleep, and I have this important thing coming up, and like pain leading to anxiety, which worsens the pain. There's spirals that doom spirals and pain spirals that I think you can spot and with experience learn to recognize, okay, that's probably more than I'm going to be able to get ahead of with the more gentle herbs. So that's one of the things that that practice brings is knowing what level, what strength of potency you start an intervention with. And if you're a new student, you always start at the most gentle and work your way up. That's part of building your experience in herbal medicine. Once you have a couple hundred cases under your belt, that experience will lead you to having a better pattern-based understanding of when to consider a low dose botanical earlier in your like therapeutic interventions. Um, so skullcap, blue vervain, and motherwort, great general relaxant formula. Add a little bit of anemone in there, much more potent relaxant formula. Yeah, Avena scutellaria as a base with some anemone. Excellent. Yeah. So Michael, you do. Uh, there are some instances in which you would be concerned about using a low dose because somebody is taking something that binds to the same receptor. Some people are on anticholinergics, and people on anticholinergic, like prescription anticholinergics, you typically wouldn't use tropane alkaloids with because the prescription anticholinergics are going to do the job that you want the tropane alkaloids for, but often in a more precise and targeted way. Uh, but you might choose a complementary action. So somebody's taking opioids that sedate the central nervous system. That means that you want to be more cautious using CNS depressants because they might potentially over sedate the central nervous system, but it also means that you've identified a potential therapeutic target if that person is looking to reduce their opioid usage. And so I commonly use CNS depressants alongside opioids in an attempt to lower opioid use. And I normally avoid or attempt to avoid um, the double CNS depressant issue with dosage scheduling. Like one of the cool things is that herbs, uh, even low dose botanicals, the effects are normally pretty short. Like an hour to 3 or 4 hours at the most, because plants evolved all of these compounds as defense mechanisms, and then we evolved a liver to break down these defenses, and so our body does a really good job at breaking down and metabolizing most plant compounds. And so if somebody is on opioids and we're wanting to decrease opioid usage because over time opioids actually can increase pain sensitivity, then we might consider using low dose botanical pain relievers like first thing in the morning when they don't have much of their opiates in their system. And we might say to them, um, we're going to dose this herbal pain relieving formula first thing in the morning, and then I want you to push back your first opioid dosage until late morning or lunchtime. Or we might say, we're going to titrate our pain relieving formula up while you work with your primary care to titrate your opioid dose down. So we might start really slow to make sure there's not overt CNS depression, and then we might bump that up a little bit every time they decrease their dose. And if you do things well, they will naturally decrease their dose because their pain will be less and they won't need as much. Um, yeah, hope that answers your question. Oh, thanks, Coral. Yeah, Michael, you're super welcome. Thanks for asking great questions. Did I cover? Yeah, these were the 5 points. So learn why we consider gentle remedies first before considering stronger remedies. Understand preparation and delivery methods. We don't use low doses as capsules normally or as teas. Um, we typically use them as tinctures in specific forms and preparations, and hands-on training and mentorship matter, understanding mechanisms of actions matter, and understanding that there is a spectrum of toxicity with all of these, and kind of how to select and choose them. Yeah, those are our 5 points. Questions, thoughts, ideas, any low doses you like or dislike or want to chit chat about? Oh, Coral, yes, thank you for that datura. I remember that, and we turned that into a massive batch of our liniment that we use for painful conditions. So thank you so much. Everybody, just another minute to type in your question or raise your hand, and I can unmute you. And I hope that some of you consider coming to our Lodos weekend. It's like the most fun herbal weekend ever. Jim McDonald always comes. Janet Kent and Dave Meesters almost always come. I think Jen Stovall's coming this year. It's a fun crew of teachers, and you get to take Lodos herbs, and you get to watch us take low-dose herbs and then attempt to teach afterwards, which is maybe in and of itself fun. Oh, that's a great question, Thorne, and I wish Mel was here to tell you all about that. I'm sure we have those written down somewhere. Clinical practice, I think, is the big requisite for that class. Oh, we do have them written down somewhere. Well, thank you all for listening to me ramble for like an hour straight. Um, I love talking about Lotus Botanicals and teaching about them and taking them. I'm looking over here at my desk. I normally keep some. By I keep a little kit. Oh, yeah, here. Yeah, so some of the remedies we try include, well, Wolf, yeah, that camera's not going to focus on any of these. Yeah, I have a little stash of low doses that I keep on my desk. Yeah, Datora topically is such a great remedy. Like topically, when you do the tropane alkaloids, you get more absorption of the scopolamine and less of the more peripherally acting hyoscyamine and atropine, and so you typically get stronger CNS properties when you use it topically versus taking it internally. And I've had people that were doing like with chronic pain that were doing the like crazy compounded pain relieving creams that were costing hundreds of dollars a month and like switched to Datura and it worked a lot better. Yes, Datura for shingles outbreaks can really help. Okay, thanks everybody. I enjoyed hanging out with you and hope I get to see you in a future class. Have a great evening.